think what's really interesting about this, well, what's really damaging and dangerous about this is that like I don't think these guys genuinely comprehend that for the average American, I feel like the average American is very selfish, right? And they don't necessarily care about everything that's going on, even though they think like, yeah, this is really messed up. Like, oh, the children are dying. I don't like that. Our taxpayers are funding this genocide. I don't like that at all. But when you are engaging in censorship, that does directly impact Americans in a way that they are.
It's worse, Hasan. They're not just engaged. What they're doing is essentially accusing you, when he uses the term blood libel, of an accessory to murder. That's what he's doing. It's not just censorship. And the danger of that, I've dealt with it, is that you just need one lunatic who believes it. I mean, that's how Yitzhak Rabin died. I was assassinated. I covered the Netanyahu rallies when he was running against Rabin, and they were putting Rabin in a Nazi effigy because of the Oslo peace agreement and burning it. There was one rally where Netanyahu walked in front of a mock funeral of Rabin. And when after he was killed, his widow Leah blamed Netanyahu and his supporters. So the danger is it's worse than censorship. And what he's doing is essentially greenlighting some fanatic to carry out a revenge act for your responsibility or sanctioning of murder. That's really what's happening. It's far graver.
Yeah. No, I recognize that for sure. It's, it is what it is. There's not really much I can do about it. But what I was going to say is the other side of this is that for the average person that sees this kind of stuff, and the consistent association from people who are, in charge of powerful institutions that are tasked with combating anti-Semitism on paper, this conflation between Israel and Jews and the simultaneous invocation of blood libel doesn't actually cause people to take a breath as it did once in the past and go, oh, wow, I don't want to be anti-Semitic or problematic here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're right. It causes them to go, oh, blood libel is, I guess, when Israel does something that is actually horrifyingly violent. They start believing that blood libel is fake. They start believing that historic anti-Semitism was actually not real. And this is how anti-Semitism manifests and festers.
This is going to boomerang. These Zionists are doing a huge disservice to Jews across the world.
Absolutely.
Because by essentially equating Judaism with Zionism and Judaism with genocide, you are, we haven't even seen the Palestinian blowback yet, and we're going to get it. You have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians whose lives have been destroyed, whose families have been obliterated, who have been forced. And the thing is, the rest of the world, they are very conscious, having just spent several weeks with them in Egypt, they're very conscious of the fact that the world doesn't care, considers them worthless, does not consider them even human. And, we know. Take the three Turkish Ottoman figures, Enver and others, Talat, who carried out the genocide of Armenians in Turkey. Of the three, two of them were assassinated. And so, of course, we're going to get blowback. But my fear is that becomes a gift to Trump and the far right. Because then, the SUVs with the tinted windows show up outside your place and mine and everyone else. But that they're orchestrating that, they're creating that. And I don't condone terrorism. I covered the horrible bus bombings in Jerusalem and everything else. At the same time, it is unfortunately a natural human reaction when your people look at the Sobibor uprising, which was then the uprising by Jewish inmates, when that famous moment when they break in and this Jewish inmate is stabbed, by his own admission, stabbing this German, going, this is for my mother, this is for my father, this is for... Well, none of us would act any differently. But that's coming. And we're already seeing, of course, glimpses of it with the Boulder, Colorado thing and the killing of the two young Israeli embassy employees.
staffers,
Of course, but this is what happens. I mean, remember one of the things that triggered Kristallnacht was the murder of a minor Jewish
French
in France, but it was a German diplomat by
Herschel Green.
Oh wow, you're good.
I think.
I remember.
I forget his last name.
Yeah,
there's that. There's David Frankfurter as well, who famously went to Switzerland and assassinated a Nazi figure that was in Switzerland at the time. But yes, it's interesting that there are so many parallels between like understandable partisan resistance and Jewish resistance against the Nazi regimes all around. far before the final solution, far before like the death camps as well, because of the open suppression of Jews existing in public in Germany and many other places and being sent to concentration camps.
When I covered the war in Salvador, one of the founders of Med San Damon, her name was Alina Margolis. She came down for 6 weeks every year to work in the refugee camps. She had been in the Warsaw Ghetto. She had been married to Marek Edelman, who was the deputy commander of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the only one who survived. And they hated the Zion. They were Bund. They were socialists. They were atheists. They were, but it was a Jewish Bund organization. So as soon as Poland was occupied, they went underground to form armed resistance. But the Zionists kept trying to negotiate and kept ratting them out. And after the war, and the big moment for them was they smuggled somebody to Hungary because Hungary didn't deport its Jews until very late. Yeah. So they smuggled someone to tell them about Treblinka. And what happened was the wealthy Jewish leaders, 1,500 of them, Eichmann actually flew to Budapest, and they gave him a lot of money, and they got to leave to go to Palestine. And they didn't warn the rest of the Hungarian Jews who were slaughtered. I mean, a huge percentage of them were killed. And she never forgave them for that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I asked her how, because they had a ghetto fighters kibbutz. So I asked her, what was it like when you first went to Israel? She said it's a nation run by collaborators. And she and Marek, they never left Poland. And Marek Edelman, this amazing figure, he not only defended the right of Palestinians to resist, he said they have a right to use armed force to resist in the same way that we did in the ghetto. So on the one hand, Israel would dine out on the ghetto uprising, and yet Edelman was a pariah. He was never invited. He was never given an honor or nothing. And I think that history of the conflict with Zionism, within Judaism itself, is often lost.
Yeah, because I feel like there is this dual purpose of the Holocaust where everything I've read about Israeli society is so critical of the survivors of the Holocaust.
Well, that was true at the beginning. So in the 50s, they were an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Then what happened was they became a very useful political tool.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until, let's say, roughly almost 2 decades after the Israeli state was founded.
Yeah. Initially, it was resentment, and even then, still to this day, like Holocaust survivors are treated very poorly in Israeli society, from what I understand. Even if the narratives have been weaponized at the behest of Israel to continuously say like this is a horrifying act of violence, understandably, because it was. And that we must never allow it to happen, which is why we have to be a militant nation, a nation that's constantly engaging in conquest.
Well, it's about eternal victimhood.
Yeah.
So it's about the sanctification of their victimhood. Elon Poppy's written about this really well. So is Norman Finkelstein.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're able to carry out this genocide and paint yourself as the victim, which is precisely what this guy is doing, what Greenblat is doing.
Yeah. It's interesting to see like so many liberal Zionists openly adopt the framework of Meir Kahan, saying never again just the Jews.
Yeah.
Like the notion that never again is supposed to imply just the Jews. Like that's what we mean when we say
the problem
never
with
again.
all the Holocaust studies, and Primo Levi got it, is that we forgot the fundamental lesson of the Holocaust. And it's not that Jews are eternal victims. It's that when you have the capacity to stop genocide and you do not, you're culpable. Yeah. And this is a really, for me, of course it's personal because I've spent so much time in Gaza, But I think this is a really seismic moment in history. The global South, I don't think that Israel's going back from this, but more importantly, we in the global North have exposed who we are. It's just the mask is dropped.
Yeah.
And as you see the breakdown of the climate and migrants fleeing, this savage industrial violence, which is perpetuated by Israel, by the UK, by France, by Germany, I worry that this becomes the template, to these global sort of climate fortresses in the North will then just kill with unmitigated savagery the way Israel and the United States, of course, is killing in Gaza.
Yep. No, precisely. That is, I think it's not only just a laboratory of weapons, it's a laboratory for suppression techniques by the state, which then, ironically enough, even Israeli Jews experience in times of discontent, like they did in 2018, I believe, when they were protesting against the Supreme Court decisions, and the same like skunk sprays that they used in Palestinian villages in the West Bank were now turned on them. And yet, and this is the final point I want to make, is that like they do not understand the imperial boomerang, because there is no way in which I think Israeli society will ever recognize that everything is based around the permanent suppression and death and destruction, extermination of the Palestinians, the indigenous population, to the land. And when you don't address that immediate contradiction and you refuse to recognize it, you don't recognize that your society is no longer the liberal bastion that you might have thought it once was. It never really was, obviously, considering that it was still built on top of the Nakba and a permanent continued suppression of Palestinians and Palestinian statehood. But this is a warning that I always try to explain to people, like what Israel looks like right now, a truly fascist society. When people say like, how did the Holocaust happen in Germany? Like, how did German people turn a blind eye to these death camps that were, next door to where they lived? And you're watching it unfold.
Yeah, of course. Well, there are two great Israeli scholars, Zev Sternhill and Yeshayahu Leibowitz, who wrote precisely that. And Yeshayahu Leibowitz, I think, wrote in the 80s, got it all. He said, if we become an occupier, then all of the methods that we use for occupation come back and that's what, you go back to Thucydides when he talked about the disintegration of the Athenian Empire. He said the tyranny that Athens imposed on others, it finally imposed on itself. That is true for Israel, but it's also true for us. Yeah. So having worked on the outer reaches of empire, I watched all this stuff get tested: drones, wholesale surveillance, militarized police, night raids. I mean, what's the difference between a night raid in Fallujah and a night raid in Oakland? Not much.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. These military entities hollow the country out from the inside, and then they use the tools of suppression that have been tested on black and brown people mostly overseas, but it comes home and hits the rest of us. And that, you're exactly right. That is what's happening in Israel, but it's also happening here.
Yeah. LRADs, initially used as a crowd dispersal tool, long-range acoustic devices in Iraq. And shortly thereafter, now LRADs are in the hands of virtually every single police.
That's how they broke up the protests on WHO.
Yeah. Every single police department in the United States of America now has long-range acoustic devices that were previously utilized by the American military in Iraq.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's fascism is colonialism turned inwards. Amy Cesar is correct.
He's great. Discourse on Colonialism is a great book. Everyone should read it.
So that is unfortunately what I think we are bouldering towards, and I don't know how to make more people aware of this devastating reality. I urge people not to succumb to nihilism and keep pushing. And keep up the pressure, because one day the contradictions will worsen to a degree where people will start recognizing that this is untenable. Do you have any final words?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we're not a fascist state yet. I mean, you and I are here. I've spoken to very large crowds in Los Angeles and Berkeley on the genocide, but we're moving rapidly towards it. Read Victor Klemperer's I Will Bear Witness. This is always incremental. We know where they're going. We know what they want. And there's only one way to stop it. That's mass mobilization. I think that, obviously the government is not going to halt the genocide, but we have to halt it. We have to target people who make these weapons in the United States. Dock workers should not be loading ships with weapons sent to Israel.
Yeah.
Because if this genocide is going to be halted, and there isn't much time left, it's up to us, because nobody in Republican, Democrat, or no one in authority is going to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Hasan.
And people can find you at your Substack if you want to shout it out.
chrishedges.substack.com.
Hell yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real honor to be able to host you. All right. Perfect.
Great.
So I'm going to keep going,
Okay.
but I'll walk you guys out here.